Have you ever done this? What about this? Keep watching if you don't ever want to do those things again. Hey everybody, welcome to Begin with Butter. I'm Shawnee, and today I have 3 tips that will help you improve your cakes no matter what recipe you're using. So, without further ado, let's get started. Before we talk about when I prep my pan, let's talk for a minute about how I prep my pan. Because I can say from experience, there is nothing worse than ugly crying over a cake in your kitchen because it is stuck in a pan. So what you're seeing here is me just greasing this pan to within an inch of its life, getting every single corner as well as I possibly can. Next, I pick up a parchment paper round, which I make using the super sophisticated method of putting the pan on a piece of parchment paper, tracing it with a pencil, and cutting it out. Once I've got that parchment paper nice and snug in there, I'm going to take another piece of butter and go over that parchment paper again. Because again, we want to bake the cake in the pan, not eat the cake from the pan. Once I'm done with the butter, I'll take some flour and go around the inside of my pan, making sure it's covered thoroughly. For chocolate cake, which is what I'm making here, some people prefer cocoa powder for this step. I personally don't prefer to do this because cocoa powder is an expensive ingredient to use to lubricate a pan, and also because I've never had an issue using flour to lubricate a pan for a chocolate cake. The reason that I do this after I've prepared my batter is because I found that sometimes if the butter and the flour sit too long in the pan while I'm preparing my batter, they can create this really unpleasant hard crust on the outside of my cake that is super unappetizing to eat. I've also found that the cake batter itself doesn't suffer from sitting for the 2 or 3 minutes that it takes me to make sure that my pans are buttered and floured. This is also time that I use to double check and make sure that my ovens are at the appropriate temperature, because your ovens are probably lying to you, but that's another video for another day. The last thing you'll see me do before my cakes go into the oven is take out my trusty food scale. I know you all are probably already tired of hearing about my food scale, but it really is the most important item in my kitchen. The reason that I'm using it here is to make sure that my cakes bake up in the same amount of time and that the texture of both cakes is consistent. And at this point, I can rest assured that my properly prepared cakes can go into the oven and I don't have to worry about them looking like this. Now I get to wax poetic about my favorite baker's secret, and that secret is simple syrup. The secret is if you take a pastry brush, just like I have here, and brush simple syrup on a still warm cake, it will help that cake retain moisture so that even if you cut into it a day or 2 later, it will still have the moisture of a freshly baked cake. I start by brushing the top of the cake before I even take it out of the pan, and then I spray my cooling rack with nonstick spray, invert the cake, flip it out of the pan, and brush the bottom and sides of the cake thoroughly. This leaves a beautiful sheen on top of the cake, but most importantly, protects that moisture on the inside of the cake. And also, pro tip, this might even help those of you who find yourselves with a bit of an overbaked cake. How do you make simple syrup and what is it? Simple syrup is simply a sugar and water reduction, which simply means you take 250 milliliters of water and 200 grams of sugar and boil until the sugar is completely dissolved. There are also tons of variations of simple syrup, like a chocolate simple syrup, a lavender simple syrup, or even a lemon simple syrup, which I use on my famous lemon pound cake. It's a secret weapon that professionals use to make sure that cakes stay moist and taste as good as they look. Simple syrup to a baker is like what nails are to a carpenter. It's just something you cannot be without. Okay guys, this is my favorite part of decorating. It's time to crumb coat. A crumb coat is simply a base layer of frosting that you put on your cake to lock in any loose crumbs that might mess up your beautiful, clean buttercream at the end. Once my cakes are completely cooled, I place a cake round that's the appropriate size for my cake on top of a cake stand that I use for decorating. This one is really useful because it spins while I'm decorating, which makes it so much easier. Once the cakes are stacked, I place a healthy amount of buttercream on top of the top layer of my cake, spreading it around like you saw me just do on the middle section of my cake. Then I just work it around until it literally starts to spill over the sides. The second that buttercream goes over the side, I start spinning. And I spin and I work that buttercream into the sides of my cake, creating a thin, uniform layer of buttercream around the sides of that cake. I don't worry at all about the top of that cake until I am sure that the sides of that cake are covered from top to bottom. Once the sides are complete, the very last step of the crumb coat is to give it a little haircut. I know that sounds crazy, but that's actually what we're doing here. We're just taking a tiny bit off of the top at the corners to ensure that when we do our final buttercream layer, we don't have elevated buttercream right at that top corner of the cake. This is also where I tend to get a little fussy over the crumb coat of my cake. But once I'm satisfied, I'm ready to pop it into either the refrigerator or the freezer until it's ready for its final decoration. Hey guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you found the information useful. If you have any remaining questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.